Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us deep into time itself, into the long, patient story of how evolution built the human body, from stardust and ancient oceans to lungs that breathe, hands that reach, and the quiet rhythm of a heart that never had a plan but somehow learned to beat anyway. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now, feel free to dim the lights, pull a blanket a little closer, or let the soft hum of a fan become your background companion. There's no rush here. If your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift, like starlight across the dark. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story, one calm thought at a time. Take a slow breath, in and out. Feel the air moving through you, the faint echo of something very old. Because in a way, the breath you just took has been travelling for billions of years, passed along by oceans, forests, and the unbroken chain of life that led to you. The story of your body doesn't begin with you or even with humans. It begins long before memory, in a restless, glowing earth still learning what it meant to be alive. Imagine the world 4 billion years ago. The ground is still young and trembling, the air thick with gas and sparks. Lightning flickers across the horizon like flashes of thought in a brain not yet born. The seas boil and cool, then boil again, heavy with minerals and molecules, the ingredients of something extraordinary that has not yet happened. If you could lean close to that ocean, you might see nothing more than foam and heat and a few shimmering specks. But in that soup of simple chemicals, amino acids, lipids and sugars, the first quiet experiments of life were beginning. No one knows exactly how it started. Perhaps a bolt of lightning struck the right puddle at the right time. Perhaps tiny mineral crystals offered a surface for the first molecules to cling to. What matters is that at some moment, somewhere, a chain of molecules discovered how to copy itself. A simple trick, but one that changed everything. It was the beginning of inheritance and the first whisper of memory inside matter. Picture a bubble forming on the surface of that ancient sea, fragile but determined. Inside it, a small collection of molecules working together, not with intention, but with rhythm. These were the first cells, soft, shapeless, self-contained. They had no eyes, no nerves, no thoughts. But they could do something miraculous. They could make more of themselves. Each division was like a heartbeat, a steady, unthinking promise that life would go on. For billions of years, this was all there was. Tiny beings floating, dividing, eating sunlight or minerals, drifting in warm tides under a toxic sky. The world's first entrepreneurs, single-celled and tireless. And then, one day, one cell did something strange. It swallowed another cell and instead of digesting it, decided to keep it. The guest became a roommate, then a partner, and soon a power plant. The host provided protection, the guest provided energy, and together they became something greater, the first complex cell. This strange partnership, called endosymbiosis, was one of evolution's most brilliant accidents. Inside your cells today are the descendants of those ancient guests, the mitochondria. Each one still carries a trace of its original independence, a tiny circular script of DNA. Every time your heart beats or your eyes blink or you dream, those microscopic ancestors are still burning quietly inside you, turning food and air into the warmth of being alive. Now the earth began to change. Some cells learned to capture sunlight, weaving energy from the sky and releasing oxygen as waste. The ocean shimmered with their work, and slowly the atmosphere filled with this new reactive gas. For many early organisms, oxygen was poison. It burned them from within. But for others, it became the fuel for growth. It was the Great Oxygenation, a planetary turning point. The air you breathe right now is a gift from those invisible pioneers who, billions of years ago, turned sunlight into breath. And so, life evolved from chaos to chemistry, from chemistry to community. There was no direction, no master plan, only chance, persistence, and time. Each cell that survived left behind a trace, a small improvement, a lucky mutation. Over eons, these traces became complexity, structure, motion, awareness. You could call it an algorithm of survival, but that would miss the poetry. It was more like a long improvisation, a melody played by molecules that learned to harmonize. Take another slow breath. The oxygen entering your lungs tonight is older than the mountains. The energy flowing through your veins once powered the tides of single-celled ancestors. The warmth in your hands is the same warmth that flickered in the volcanic vents of the early Earth. You are not separate from that history. You are its continuation. The latest verse in a song that began before time had a name. Your body is built from the stories of these ancient cells. Their chemistry became your flesh. Their persistence became your heartbeat. Even their mistakes, the mutations, the accidents, the detours, became your imagination, your laughter, your dreams. The proof is written in your DNA. A long looping text written not in words but in molecules, passed from cell to cell, from generation to generation, for nearly 4 billion years. And though you're made of this endless inheritance, you're also something new, a creature capable of looking back and wondering how it all happened. The cells that once drifted aimlessly in the sea now think, feel, and ask questions through you. That, perhaps, is evolution's quietest miracle. That matter learned to ask about itself. So as we drift further into the story, remember this. Your body is not a finished design, but a living record of change. Every cell in you carries the echo of that first bubble of life, the whisper of ancient seas, the spark of lightning that kissed a puddle and refused to let go. Take one more breath. Let it settle softly. You're alive. And that alone is the result of 4 billion years of patient, miraculous persistence. If we follow the thread a little further, the story carries us from the single, drifting cell into something far more ambitious, a gathering, a community, a living experiment in teamwork. For billions of years, life had been a solo act. Tiny cells floated through the oceans, dividing when they were ready, living and dying without much regard for anyone else. But evolution, ever the patient sculptor, eventually discovered that cooperation could be its next great invention. Imagine one of those ancient seas, green and heavy with life. Every drop of water is crowded with tiny spheres of possibility. Cells gliding through invisible currents. One might absorb sunlight. Another might feed on minerals or drift through shadows, quietly replicating its fragile shell. None of them yet know the word together, but slowly, by accident and necessity, that word begins to take shape. At first, cells simply refuse to part after dividing. 2 stay attached, then 4, then 8. A small cluster drifts as one, is not yet a body, just a coincidence of kinship. But in time, these clusters begin to behave like small societies. One cell might take up the task of movement, waving tiny hair-like filaments called cilia. Another might focus on digesting food, another on reproduction. They're all clones of the same ancestor, yet they begin to specialize, to play roles. It's easy to think of evolution as a series of fierce competitions, but here it becomes a quiet collaboration. To survive as a group, cells must develop trust. They must learn to stick together, literally. And so evolution invents the first glue, proteins that latch onto neighboring membranes like tiny molecular Velcro. These are the first tissues in the history of life. a collection of cells that know how to hold hands. But sticking together isn't enough. A true body also needs communication, a way for one cell to tell another what's happening. A chemical signal that says, "We need more oxygen over here," or "Stop dividing, we're full." And so began the ancient art of cellular conversation. You could imagine it as the earliest gossip. Molecular messages passed through the fluid around them, shaping when to grow, when to rest, when to repair. Out of that gossip rose the first organised colonies. Sponges, for example, still carry echoes of that early experiment. Their bodies are networks of specialised cells filtering seawater, each doing its quiet task, pumping, capturing, digesting, without any central command. They are bodies without brains, teamwork made visible. From such humble collectives, the blueprints of complex life began to form. In these tiny societies, another miracle appeared: coordination. To move efficiently, cells had to align their efforts. Muscles, nerves, circulation, all of these are later versions of that simple need to act together. The early multicellular creatures were like soft choreography in slow motion, cells learning to dance in synchrony. Of course, not every step was graceful. When cooperation goes wrong, chaos follows. A cell that forgets how to behave, that grows without limit, can destroy the very colony that sustains it. That rebellion still echoes today in what we call cancer, one cell breaking the pact of unity. Evolution, ever adaptive, found ways to manage such betrayal. Repair systems, immune responses, programmed cell death. Life was learning not just to live, but to govern itself. As the colonies grew larger, they began to discover the idea of shape. Symmetry appeared, not the kind you find in a perfect snowflake, but the biological kind, the simple rule of balance. Some creatures developed bodies like wheels, radial symmetry, with arms spreading outward, sensing in all directions like starfish or jellyfish. Others evolved a front and back, left and right, bilateral symmetry, the body plan that eventually led to you. Having a front meant having direction, and direction meant purpose. Once you can face the world, you can chase it. With direction came something else, a head. Sense organs began clustering at the front, a place for feeling, tasting, seeing, deciding. This process, called cephalization, was a masterpiece of efficiency. It was as if evolution realized that if the body was going somewhere, the important parts should ride up front. And so, the first nervous system took root, tiny webs of electric cells connecting the front to the rest of the body. Each spark a simple thought, a first rehearsal for what would one day become awareness. The oceans filled with strange shapes, soft tubes, frilled discs, ribbon-like forms gliding through light. Each was a new attempt at complexity, an experiment in coordination. None of them knew that their quiet cooperation would one day build forests, animals, and thinkers. Take a moment to imagine what that world must have looked like. The seafloor rippling with living carpets, the water filled with translucent sheets that breathed and fed and multiplied. There were no predators yet, no eyes to watch, no fear or chase, only the slow pulse of being. It was a time of innocence in the story of life, a rehearsal before the great performance to come. You might think of your own body as separate, solitary, but it is not. You're made of trillions of cells, each descended from those early cooperators, each quietly doing its part. Your skin cells knit together like a living fabric. Your neurons pass whispers of electricity. Your blood cells ferry oxygen, never resting, never arguing. You are quite literally a colony that learned to call itself one. Even now, your body's in constant negotiation between growth and restraint, between unity and individuality. When you heal from a cut, when your immune system rallies to defend you, when your heartbeat speeds up because you remembered something beautiful, that is multicellularity at work, billions of ancient voices still agreeing to be you. And perhaps there is something comforting in that. The body you inhabit is not a fortress or a machine. It is a community, bound by trust and time. Every breath, every blink, every thought is a council meeting of cells that decided long ago that together was better than alone. From here, the story deepens. Evolution will keep building on this idea, from structure to skeleton, from coordination to motion. The single cell has learned to be many, and soon those many will learn to stand, to move, and to reach for the light. From here, the story opens into one of evolution's most elegant inventions, the spine. That slender column running down your back might creak, ache, or make odd noises when you stretch in the morning, but it's also the reason you can walk, twist, lift, and even sit upright to listen to stories like this one. To understand where it came from, we have to return to the oceans again, to a time when animals were little more than soft tubes of muscle and hope. Imagine a world of watery light about 500 million years ago. The seafloor was crowded with creatures that squirmed, drifted, or burrowed. Most were soft-bodied, without bones, shells, or armour. Life at this point was flexible but flimsy. Then something extraordinary appeared. A thread of stiffness running through the body, a simple rod that allowed muscles to pull against it. It wasn't yet a bone, but it gave structure and purpose to movement. This rod was the notochord, the ancestor of every spine that ever was. The notochord was made of springy tissue, strong but bendable, the perfect balance between firmness and grace. It allowed early creatures to swim with control, curving their bodies from side to side instead of simply wriggling like jelly. For the first time, movement became efficient, directed, almost intentional. These early animals, called chordates, had unlocked a new kind of freedom. If you've ever seen a tadpole flick through water, or a fish glide with the rhythm of its tail, you've seen the ghost of that ancient design. In fact, even human embryos still show traces of a notochord in their early stages of growth, before it transforms into the spine we know. It's as if each of us briefly rehearses the entire history of vertebrate evolution before we're born, a quiet reminder of where we came from. Over time, the notochord evolved into something more durable. Segments of cartilage formed around it, protecting the delicate nerve cord that ran along its back. Those segments grew harder, turning to bone, and so the first vertebrae were born, small repeating rings that stacked together like beads on a thread. With this upgrade came stability, protection, and power. Muscles could anchor to bone, nerves could travel safely through their hollow corridors. The blueprint of the vertebrate body, fish, bird, lizard, mammal, and eventually human, had taken shape. In those early oceans, creatures with spines had a clear advantage. They could swim faster, grow larger, sense danger, and chase prey. Soon, evolution began experimenting with the design, adding fins for balance, jaws for grasping, armour for defence. Fish flourished in astonishing forms, from jawless lampreys to ancient armoured species with names that sound more like myths than biology. The world was learning what bones could do. If you were to trace your spine back through time, you'd pass through this entire lineage. Fish with bony plates, amphibians creeping onto land, reptiles rising under the sun, mammals stretching and sprinting across plains. Each one carried the same basic pattern: a central column, a network of nerves, a partnership between strength and flexibility. You could say that every vertebrate body since has been a remix of the same original song. Now, let's turn that design upright. When your distant ancestors first stood on two legs, their spines, built for a horizontal life, had to reinvent themselves. The shape that once arched gently through a four-footed body now curved into an elegant S, balancing the weight of the head, chest, and hips. It was a clever compromise, but not a perfect one. Standing up came with a price: back pain, slipped discs, the occasional groan when getting out of a chair. Our spines do their best, but they were never meant to hold us vertical for long stretches. Evolution is practical, not ergonomic. Still, that compromise gave us everything that makes us human. By freeing the hands, the spine allowed us to build, to reach, to gesture, to cradle. It turned us from crawlers into wanderers. The vertebral column became the central axis not just of the body, but of identity. The quiet structure that lets the brain look outward and the heart stay lifted toward the sky. Think of it as evolution's architectural masterpiece. The vertebrae are stacked like a flexible tower, connected by cushions of cartilage that act like tiny shock absorbers. Each one protects the spinal cord, that silver thread of nerves carrying messages between your brain and the rest of you. Every movement, every reflex, every shiver of cold or flutter of excitement travels along that line. The spine is more than a structure, it's a bridge of communication. When you reach for a cup, the order begins in your brain, travels down your spine, through your shoulder to your fingers. When the cup feels warm, that signal rushes back the same way, a conversation of light-speed impulses that never rests. You could almost think of your spine as an ancient telegraph line, carrying countless messages every moment. None of them noticed, all of them vital, and just like any masterpiece, the spine tells a story of compromise. Strength needs flexibility. Protection must allow motion. A little too rigid and you'd snap. Too soft and you'd collapse. It's a delicate balance that life has been fine-tuning for 500 million years. Even the aches and cracks of age are small echoes of that long negotiation. When you stretch, when your back pops in that oddly satisfying way, you're hearing the quiet language of that ancient column, bones speaking to each other in pressure and release. It's easy to forget what a miracle it is simply to stand upright, to feel gravity pressing down while your body answers, "Not today." Take a slow breath and let your shoulders relax. Feel the gentle pull of your spine holding everything together. From head to tailbone, it's the same principle that guided fish through water, reptiles across sand, and early humans into the open savanna. You carry that entire history inside you, a living pillar of persistence. So the next time your back complains, you can smile a little. That ache is the echo of ambition. The price of standing tall in a world that once belonged only to swimmers and crawlers. Evolution may not have built perfection, but it built possibility, a spine strong enough to carry the story forward, yet flexible enough to bow in gratitude. And as the path of our story carries us onward, that column of strength will find new purpose. The same backbone that steadied the body will one day lift it from the sea, step onto land, and reach for the open air. The trail of clues now leads us from the water's gentle sway to the first uncertain steps on land. The creatures that would one day build cities and paint skies began as wanderers in shallow pools, restless swimmers pressing against the limits of what water could offer. It was here, among mud and reeds, that evolution tried one of its boldest experiments, turning fins into legs and breath into something that could meet the open air. Imagine the Earth roughly 375 million years ago. The air is heavy with moisture, the continents green and steaming. Rivers split into countless shallow streams, their beds lined with silt, the air above them buzzing with early insects. Beneath the water, fish glide through the warmth, their bodies armoured in scales, their fins fine-tuned for swimming. Yet among them, a few are beginning to linger closer to the surface. They lift their heads to gulp air when the water grows still and low in oxygen. They push against the soft riverbed as if testing the weight of the world above. One of these pioneers, known today as Tiktaalik, looked halfway between a fish and a lizard. It had a flat head like a crocodile and eyes placed on top, built to peer over water's edge. Inside its fins were bones, one large bone connected to two smaller ones, followed by a cluster of smaller pieces that formed something like a wrist. If you trace your own arm, you'll find the same pattern. 1 bone in the upper arm, 2 in the forearm, then the delicate lattice of your wrist and fingers. That layout is ancient, passed down through hundreds of millions of years of quiet improvement. Tiktaalik wasn't walking proudly on land just yet. It was probably dragging itself through shallow water, using its strong fins to prop up its body, or to push through mud in short, clumsy bursts. It might have looked like a creature doing the world's first push-up, half in, half out of the water, unsure whether it belonged to one element or the other. But that uncertain motion marked a revolution. Why would any fish leave the safety of water? Perhaps ponds were drying out, or food was easier to find along the banks, or fewer predators lurked there. Perhaps it was simply curiosity, an instinct older than reason, that pulled them toward the unknown. Whatever the cause, those fish who could gulp air or lift their bodies had an advantage. They could survive the temporary absence of water, crawl toward a new pool, and claim new feeding grounds. In time, their descendants would become amphibians, the first true land dwellers with backbones. The shift from water to land required an astonishing redesign. Gills, so perfect for drawing oxygen from water, collapsed in dry air. Lungs had to take over, inflating like spongy trees, each branch dividing into smaller and smaller passages until air could meet blood. Those tiny air sacs, alveoli as scientists later called them, were like dewdrops inside a tree's leaves, where the invisible exchange of gases could happen. It was delicate and it worked. The skeleton also had to adapt. In water, buoyancy supports the body. On land, gravity demands its due. Limbs strengthened, joints formed, and spines thickened to bear the new burden. Ribs expanded to protect the growing lungs. Even skin evolved. What was once smooth and moist now needed to seal in water, resisting the drying sun. Early amphibians still had to keep close to damp places, but they were on their way. Their senses too began to change. Sound travels faster through water than through air, so hearing had to be reinvented. Part of the skull's bones shifted, eventually becoming the delicate middle ear bones that now help you hear a whisper or a song. Eyes adjusted for brighter light. Eyelids appeared to protect them. Smell became sharper, touch more complex. The world was wider now, full of new textures, temperatures, and sounds to decode. Each change was small, barely noticeable in its own time, but together they rewrote the rules of life. Fish had become explorers of the land. The water's edge was no longer a boundary but a doorway. Take a moment to picture that transition. The mud squelches under a fin as almost a foot. The air shimmers with heat. A creature, awkward and determined, lifts itself onto wet ground for the first time. Its heart beats faster in the strange new weight of gravity. Its skin tightens against the dry wind. Behind it, the water ripples, waiting as if holding its breath. Ahead, a landscape opens, untamed, unclaimed, calling. That moment may have lasted only seconds, yet it shaped everything that followed. From these amphibians came reptiles, better suited for life away from the water. Their skin thickened, their eggs hardened, their lungs grew more efficient. From reptiles came mammals and birds, each modification another verse in the song of adaptation. And yet, through every variation, the old blueprint remained. 1 bone, 2 bones, many bones, digits, a rhythm so ancient that even a whale's flipper, a bat's wing, and your own hand follow it still. Think of that the next time you reach for something or wave or hold another hand. Inside that gesture are bones that first learned to move in shallow rivers, shaped by the pressure of water and the pull of curiosity. The flexibility of your wrist, the strength of your shoulder, the simple joy of motion. All are inheritances from creatures who once flopped through the mud in search of air. It's humbling, isn't it? To realize that the same movements that built the first steps on land now let you climb stairs, type words, or cradle a cup of tea. You are, in a very real sense, still walking for those fish, still continuing the journey they began when they dared to lift their bodies above the tide. So the next time you take a stroll, feel the rhythm of your steps as more than habit. It's the echo of an ancient experiment that worked, not perfectly, but well enough. The world is full of accidents that vanished, but this one endured. The story of your walk began in the ripples of a Devonian pond, carried through countless generations, until one day it became the way you cross a room. And from here, the story rises further. The creatures that crawled from the sea will learn to thrive in the open air, to sense, to feel, and to build the living fabric that covers them, the skin that keeps the inner ocean safe inside. The path now carries us from bones and motion to the boundary that separates us from the world, the quiet miracle of skin. It's easy to take it for granted, this thin envelope that holds us together, yet it is the first thing the world ever notices about you and the last thing that keeps you whole. Beneath its surface lies a history just as deep as that of your spine or your heart, a story of water, light, and survival. If you could reach back through time, far before mammals and scales, before even the first fish, you would find that the earliest versions of skin were nothing more than oily films. In those primitive cells drifting in the ancient oceans, the membrane was a fragile boundary between chaos and order, a bubble that kept the inside in and the outside out. It was life's first act of self-definition, a soft yes and no to the universe. As creatures became more complex, that film thickened and specialized. Layers of cells learned to link together, creating sheets that could stretch, bend, and heal. These early skins were more than wrapping. They were gateways. Through them, the world could be felt. The warmth of the sun, the pull of current, the touch of another life. You could think of those first surfaces as the earliest sensors, a living interface between matter and experience. In the ocean, the needs were simple. Fish and early amphibians had skin built for glide and defense. It shimmered with mucus, a slippery armor that reduced drag and discouraged parasites. Tiny overlapping scales added a flexible layer of protection, the biological equivalent of chainmail that could bend and twist. Each scale was a small victory, hard enough to protect, soft enough to move. Evolution was learning how to make armor that could dance, but when creatures began stepping onto land, everything changed. The air, once a distant idea, became a danger. Without the water's embrace, life began to dry out. Moisture, the very essence of being, escaped through unprotected skin. So evolution answered with a new invention, keratin, a strong, fibrous protein that sealed the body like a natural raincoat. Keratin became one of life's most versatile materials. It formed scales for reptiles, feathers for birds, horns for beasts, claws, hooves, nails, and later, the hair that you now brush, cut, or let fall across your forehead. Keratin was not glamorous, but it was genius. It could be moulded into softness or strength, shimmer or dullness, and always with the same purpose, to shield what mattered. In reptiles, keratin kept water locked in. In mammals, it learned to regulate temperature, to sense touch, to grow and shed with the rhythm of life itself. It's the same substance that shapes the delicate arch of an eyelash and the solid curve of a hoof. One simple protein, infinite expression. And then inner skin became something even more remarkable. It turned into a multi-layered masterpiece, 3 major tiers working together like a quiet orchestra. The outer layer, the epidermis, renews itself every few weeks, growing and shedding millions of cells a day. Beneath it lies the dermis, rich with nerves and blood vessels, where warmth, touch, and pain are translated into feeling. Deeper still, the hypodermis cushions everything, a soft bed of fat that insulates and shapes the contours of the body. You might think of your skin as a patchwork, but it's more like an ecosystem. On its surface live billions of tiny companions, bacteria, fungi, and mites, most of them harmless, many of them helpful. They feed, balance, and protect in ways you never notice. They are your invisible roommates sharing your every gesture and breath. When you brush your arm against a table, they travel too. Even stillness is never truly still. And of course, skin learned another job, keeping you cool. Humans became some of the sweatiest creatures on Earth, not from anxiety, though that doesn't hurt, but because sweating allows the body to survive heat. While most animals pant or retreat into shade, humans run, shimmering with droplets that turn to vapour and carry warmth away. It's messy, yes, but it's the secret behind our endurance. Our ancestors could chase prey for hours under a blazing sun while others overheated and stopped. You might call sweat our evolutionary superpower, unglamorous but unbeatable. Hair, too, changed its purpose. What began as insulation became a tool for expression, for beauty, even identity. In some species, fur signals dominance or attraction. In humans, it turned into an art form, styled, trimmed, coloured, or left wild. Yet beneath all the vanity, its original function remains: to sense the smallest movement of air, to trap warmth, to whisper information to the skin below. Each hair is a tiny antenna tuned to the world's touch. And then there is pigment, the quiet painter of diversity. The many shades of human skin come from melanin, a natural pigment that absorbs sunlight and shields cells from ultraviolet damage. Closer to the equator, darker skin offers protection against intense rays. Nearer the poles, lighter tones help capture sunlight to produce vitamin D. It was never a matter of beauty or hierarchy, only geography and survival. The colour of skin is simply a story written in sunlight. If you think about it, skin tells emotions just as fluently as it tells biology. It flushes when we're embarrassed, pales when we're afraid, sweats when we're nervous. It wrinkles with laughter, heals after harm, and carries the record of our years in fine lines and freckles. It is, in every sense, the diary of being alive. Take a moment to notice your own. The warmth against your clothes, the faint tingle when air moves across it, the pulse that beats just beneath. Your skin is not just a shell, it's a conversation between you and the world, between inner and outer, between what you keep and what you share. And for all its resilience, it remains tender. It burns, scars, dries and mends, always working quietly, always renewing. In every speck of dust that drifts from sunlight in your room are tiny flakes of what was once you, skin cells returning to the air that first gave them shape. Evolution has been recycling your story for billions of years, so the next time you look in a mirror, remember that reflection is not a wall between you and the universe. It's a boundary made of light and memory, thin enough to let the world in, strong enough to keep you whole. You are a collection of ancient surfaces, perfected by time, softened by care, still learning how to feel. And as we drift further into this story, that sense of touch will become more than protection. It will become perception, the doorway through which light, sound, taste, and warmth enter the body's quiet cathedral of awareness. If we follow the story back beneath the waves again, we find that life has grown restless once more. Soft bodies are no longer enough. Movement itself is becoming an art form, and as evolution so often does, it begins to solve one problem by creating another. To move with purpose, life would need something to push against. It needed a framework, not armour on the outside, but support from within. Picture an ancient ocean, 500 million years ago, shimmering with forms that twist and flicker. Worm-like creatures drift through the shallows, some with faint cords of stiffness along their bodies. It was not yet bone, not even cartilage, but something springy, a flexible rod that let muscles pull more efficiently. That simple line of support was called a notochord, and in it lay the blueprint for every spine that would follow. The notochord wasn't grand or glorious. It was in a sense the first experiment in scaffolding, an idea of architecture inside flesh. It gave these creatures a kind of balance, a way to swim with coordination rather than chaos. Muscles could now work in rhythm, pulling one side then the other, sending waves down the body like a soft whip. It was the difference between wriggling and swimming, between survival and grace. Over time, this idea evolved into something sturdier. Around that central rod, rings of cartilage began to form, segment by segment, creating small protective chambers. Through those chambers ran a delicate thread of nerves, carrying messages from a primitive brain to the tail and back. This was the spinal cord, a line of communication that would grow into the foundation of every vertebrate nervous system. Each ring of cartilage became a vertebra. Stack enough of them together and you get the first true spine, strong, flexible, protective. It was like nature had invented a flexible bridge that could twist and bend yet never collapse. Fish with spines could move faster and longer than those without. They became hunters, gliders, travellers. The ocean had given rise to a new kind of motion, purposeful, coordinated, efficient. If you could see inside your own back, you'd find that this same design remains. The human spine still holds the echo of that ancient line, its 33 vertebrae stacked like beads, its delicate discs cushioning each turn and twist. The spinal cord still threads through them, sending millions of tiny electric whispers between brain and body. Every breath, every step, every blink is part of that conversation, a silent partnership between motion and message. Think of your spine as a living tower. The bones form its structure, but the real magic lies in the spaces between, in the cushioning discs that let you bend and sway. Without them, every movement would grind like stone. With them, you can stretch, twist, dance, and fold. It's a miracle of compromise, strength, and flexibility intertwined. Of course, compromise comes at a cost. When our ancestors began to stand upright, that horizontal bridge had to turn vertical. The elegant arc of a fish's spine became the curving S-shape of a human one, a design clever enough to balance the head above the hips, but not without flaws. Gravity became a constant challenge, pulling, compressing, demanding. Our backs ache not because evolution failed, but because it succeeded just enough to keep us walking. The next time you straighten your posture, you might feel a faint reminder of that old tension. It's not just bad habits or age, it's history pressing down through time. Our spines still carry the price of ambition. They let us stand, but they also remind us that standing is work. Yet, for all its complaints, the spine is astonishing. It can bear loads, absorb shocks, protect the fragile core of our nervous system. It's an instrument of precision, with nerves branching out to every part of the body. When you reach for a cup, that signal begins in your brain, travels down your spine, through your shoulder and into your fingers, a single command carried by lightning. When the cup's warmth meets your skin, another message travels back up the same route. Confirmation, sensation, satisfaction. You could almost call it a conversation, every motion an exchange, every gesture a dialogue. And that dialogue never stops. Even when you sleep, your spine hums with life, adjusting your posture, maintaining balance, protecting the flow of breath. The vertebrae are not static. They glide, pivot, shift, carrying your weight like a suspension bridge constantly adjusting to the wind. Every sigh, every twist, every small act of comfort is the result of that hidden intelligence. Take a moment to feel it now. Straighten slightly, then let your shoulders drop. The structure beneath you is older than bone itself, a living thread that began in the ocean and still holds you upright. When you breathe in, the vertebrae subtly expand. When you breathe out, they settle again. You are, in this small way, repeating the rhythm of those ancient swimmers, flex and release, push and drift. Evolution built this system through trial and error. Early vertebrates experimented with armour, cartilage, bone, whatever worked best in their world. Some designs, like the heavy-plated fish, were too rigid, others, like the eels, too loose. But somewhere in between, balance emerged. That balance, polished over millions of years, became the foundation for everything with a backbone. Fish, birds, mammals, and you. And so, the spine became both symbol and structure. In language, we still say someone has backbone to mean courage or integrity. The will to stand firm. It's a metaphor born from biology, strength that does not break under pressure. But even courage, like posture, must bend sometimes. Too rigid, and it snaps. Too soft, and it folds. The secret, as evolution discovered long ago, lies in knowing how to bend without breaking. So when your back creaks after a long day, or you arch in a quiet stretch before sleep, think of it not as failure, but as heritage. That small twinge is the echo of 1 billion ancestors swimming, turning, standing. It's your body remembering its own history. The line that connects you to every creature that ever dared to move. Take one more deep breath and feel your spine respond. The subtle lift, the gentle alignment. That single structure allows your eyes to meet the horizon and your hands to reach forward. Without it, there would be no walking, no standing, no dancing, no embrace, just drifting. The spine is evolution's way of saying, you are meant to move. And from this column of strength, the story will soon rise again, for the creatures who carried this new architecture would not stay in the sea forever. Strength invites exploration, and motion hungers for new worlds. Somewhere, just above the waterline, the future waited. A stretch of land ready to test what bones could truly do. The trail of our story now rises from the water, where fins are beginning to dream of becoming something more. For countless ages, life had belonged to the sea. The oceans were comfortable, rich, forgiving. A world where gravity was kind and bodies could float with little effort. But comfort, as evolution often shows, rarely lasts forever. Imagine a river delta on a warm, heavy afternoon, some 370 million years ago. The air trembles with insects, the water ripples with movement. Below the surface, fish dart between reeds, glimmering like blades of light. Yet in the shallows, some of them are doing something strange. They rise toward the air, opening their mouths as though drinking from the sky. The water is low, thick with mud, oxygen scarce. To survive, a few of these fish begin to gulp air directly. Their gills no longer enough. Among them is a creature we now call Tiktaalik, a name borrowed from the language of the Inuit, meaning burbot fish. But Tiktaalik was no ordinary fish. It had flat, wide bones beneath its fins. One bone near the body, two in the middle, then smaller bones spreading outward, ending in what could almost be called wrists. It could prop itself up, press against the riverbed, and lift its head. It still breathed mostly through gills, but it had the beginnings of lungs. Tiny pockets of tissue that filled with air when the water around it ran out of breath. If you look down at your arm right now, from your shoulder to your elbow, your wrist, your hand, you're tracing the same ancient pattern. One bone, two bones, many bones, digits. A design older than trees, older than mountains. The first architecture of motion that would one day let you write, wave, hold a child, or turn a page. That pattern has never been replaced because it never needed to be. Tiktaalik didn't stroll across dry land like a pioneer in a painting. It probably flopped, lurched, and rested, half in the water, half out. But those awkward pushes were history's first steps. The water's edge became a testing ground where lungs, bones, and skin all learned new tricks. Each attempt, each mutation was a question. Could life survive outside the waves? The rewards were enormous. On land there was light, warmth, open space, and no predators yet. Plants had already colonized the ground, making soft carpets of moss and fern. Insects buzzed among them. the first sound of wings above the earth. The fish who could breathe air and move against gravity had found a paradise of opportunity. The challenge was simply surviving long enough to enjoy it. Every detail of their anatomy began to shift. Gills, perfect for pulling oxygen from water, collapsed in air so lungs expanded, filling with spongy chambers like the branches of a tree. Those tiny chambers, the alveoli, became meeting places where breath could pass its invisible gift to the blood. There were no numbers, no formulas, no symbols guiding the design, only necessity and patience. The process worked, and that was enough. Bones thickened, muscles reorganized, ribs broadened into cages to protect the new lungs, limbs stiffened to support the body's weight. Each small change was a conversation with gravity, an unspoken compromise between structure and freedom. Even senses had to adapt. Water carries sound differently than air, so the body had to learn new ways to listen. One of the bones in the skull shifted its purpose, becoming the first middle ear bone. In time, there would be 3, tiny instruments that turned vibration into the music of hearing. Eyes, once tuned for the dim, filtered light of water, now blinked against sunlight. Eyelids evolved to protect them, tears to keep them moist. Smell changed too. The same molecules that once drifted through water now travelled by air, sharper and more complex. The first breath was also the first scent of land. These early explorers didn't march onto dry ground with confidence. They inched, slid, rested, and tried again. Imagine one pushing through wet reeds, its body half submerged, the weight of its own head pressing down. For a moment it pauses, breathing in the open air, feeling sunlight on its scales. Then, with a small push of its fins, it moves forward again. It doesn't know it's doing anything remarkable, but with each movement, it is inventing walking. In time, its descendants will become amphibians, creatures of 2 worlds. They will lay eggs in water but breathe air, moving through both realms like memories that refuse to fade. Some will remain tied to rivers and swamps, others will wander further, growing thicker skin to keep their moisture, stronger bones to bear their weight. From them will come reptiles, birds, mammals, and you. If you could look at your own body with ancient eyes, you would still see the ocean's signature everywhere. Your blood carries the same salts as seawater. The rhythm of your heartbeat follows the pulse of tides. The very shape of your limbs is a quiet echo of fins pushing against a riverbed. You are, quite literally, a land-bound fish with improved plumbing and better posture. Take a slow breath now. Feel how your chest expands, how easily the air enters. Each inhale is an inheritance, each exhale a thank you note to those first creatures who dared to leave the sea. Their struggle became your ease. What was once effort is now simply life. It's humbling to think that every step you take, on pavement, sand, grass, or carpet, began as an ancient experiment in mud. Each muscle in your leg is a living fossil, perfected over eons of trial and error. And even now, the same physics apply, balance, leverage, push, release. You walk not because you learned to, but because the world once invited a fish to try. So the next time you stretch your legs or feel the ground beneath your feet, imagine the river that began it all. The slow, shimmering water, the air above it thick with mystery. Somewhere a creature lifted its body just enough to see the world differently, and that moment changed everything. From the sea, life had found structure. On land, it would now find sensation. The same creatures that learned to crawl through mud would soon learn to see, to hear, to feel the whisper of wind against their skin. Evolution had given life bones and breath. Its next gift would be perception, the awakening of the senses. From here, the story opens into the thin but miraculous layer that keeps us from dissolving into the world, the living shield we call skin. It's something you rarely think about unless it's scraped, sunburned, or touched. Yet this quiet boundary is not only your body's first defense, but also its most ancient memory. It remembers the sea, the sun, and the slow exchange between inside and outside that began when life first dared to breathe. If you could travel back through time to those early land explorers, you'd find their struggle wasn't just with gravity or breath, it was with dryness. The ocean, once a cradle, had always kept their cells moist and safe, but on land, air was a thief, drawing water away with every breeze. To survive here, life needed to seal itself without losing sensitivity. So evolution began crafting a solution from the material it knew best, the same proteins and lipids that once formed simple membranes. Over generations, these became layered surfaces, tough enough to keep the world out, delicate enough to let it in. Early amphibians still had damp, permeable skin, a compromise between the sea and the air. But their descendants, the reptiles, developed something revolutionary, a coating of keratin. Keratin is a simple, strong protein that hardens into armour when layered and dried. It made scales, claws, shells and feathers possible, nature's great toolkit for survival. Keratin could shimmer, dull, bend, or gleam, and with each new use, life found another way to endure. It's the same substance that shapes your nails and hair today, the same material that once helped dinosaurs rule the world and birds take flight. In mammals, this armour softened again, transforming into flexibility rather than hardness. Your skin is no longer a shield of scales, but a living fabric, elastic, healing, self-renewing. It's made of 3 main layers that work together in silence. The outer layer, the epidermis, is a constant act of rebirth, producing new cells that rise, die, and flake away. Millions of tiny particles drifting into the air around you every day. The layer beneath, the dermis, hums with life. Blood vessels, sweat glands, and nerves, all weaving a living web. Deeper still lies the hypodermis, a cushion of soft fat that insulates and gives shape, storing warmth like a quiet hearth. Think of your skin as both wall and window. It keeps you contained, yet it allows you to sense everything: heat, cold, texture, pain, comfort. The moment you brush your fingertips across wood or fabric, hundreds of tiny receptors in your skin fire signals that race up through your nerves and spine to your brain. And within less than a second, your mind translates it all into meaning. Rough, smooth, warm, familiar. It's easy to forget how miraculous that is, to feel the world without losing yourself in it. Of course, this boundary is shared, not solitary. Your skin is home to billions of microscopic guests, bacteria, fungi, mites, forming a miniature ecosystem known as the skin microbiome. Most are friendly tenants, guarding against harmful invaders, breaking down oils, or even influencing your scent. You carry entire communities with you, unseen and constant, your own tiny civilization. Even stillness is never still. Every inch of your surface is alive with quiet motion. And then there's sweat, humanity's unexpected advantage. Unlike most mammals, we rely less on fur and more on perspiration to stay cool. Each droplet that forms and evaporates carries heat away, allowing us to run farther and longer without overheating. Our ancestors could chase prey for hours in the open sun while other animals collapsed from the heat. It's not the most glamorous superpower. Damp foreheads and sticky palms rarely feel heroic. But in evolutionary terms, it made us endurance champions of the planet. Hair, too, evolved to suit new needs. Once a full-body blanket, it gradually became more symbolic than protective. A strand of hair is mostly keratin, but it behaves like art. It can stand on end in fear, gleam with oil in sunlight, or gather in expression. Braids, curls, colours, and countless variations. In that small filament of protein lies both biology and culture, function and emotion. Each strand is a whisper of the body's history. Insulation turned into identity. And then, skin began to paint itself. The artist was sunlight, and the brush was melanin. Melanin is the pigment that gives colour to your skin, hair, and eyes. It's not decoration but defence, absorbing ultraviolet rays before they can damage the delicate DNA inside your cells. The more sunlight your ancestors lived under, the more melanin their bodies produced, darkening the skin for protection. In colder, dimmer regions where sunlight was rare, the skin lightened to let in more rays for producing vitamin D. Skin colour, in other words, was never a statement. It was an equation of sunlight and survival, balanced perfectly for each environment. The beauty of this system is in its practicality. Every shade, every tone is an adaptation to the same challenge: how to meet the sun without burning beneath it. And yet, humans turn this natural spectrum into symbols of difference, forgetting that every pigment carries the same chemistry, the same origin story, a shared inheritance from creatures who once needed only to survive. If you look closely, you'll find your skin tells stories even now. It blushes when you're embarrassed, goes pale with fear, flushes with warmth, or tightens in anger. It records time through freckles, scars, and wrinkles, the map of your life written in tone and texture. It heals quietly, seals wounds, renews itself in cycles so steady you never notice. The dust that glows in a beam of sunlight in your room is mostly made of those spent cells, the fragments of your past selves drifting back into the air that once shaped you. Take a slow breath and feel your skin stretch slightly as your ribs rise. The air that brushes against you now has touched countless other lives before this moment. Every breeze carries the memory of oceans, forests, fires, and breath. Your skin is how the world reaches you, how it reminds you that you belong to it. So much of existence happens here, on this quiet surface, the meeting place of the self and everything beyond it. You are not sealed away from the world, you are continuously touched by it, shaped by it, and healed by it. Your skin is not a wall, it is a border of kindness, a contract between you and the air, the same kind of promise evolution made long ago when life decided it would not dry out, it would not give up, it would endure. And the path now carries us toward this boundary will awaken into something even more miraculous. Through it, the world will begin to be seen, heard, tasted, and felt. The moment when the body first opens its senses and starts to know that it's alive. Our quiet exploration now turns to the moment when life first opened its eyes. For millions of years, creatures had felt their way through darkness, responding to touch, pressure, the pull of gravity. But there came a time when life began to notice something else. Light, a flicker, a shimmer, a difference between brightness and shadow. It wasn't vision yet, just awareness, the faint whisper of the sun across the water. But from that simple spark, an entire new world began to unfold. Light is the oldest messenger in the universe. Long before there were eyes to see it, light travelled through the endless dark, carrying stories of stars and distance. When early cells learned to sense light, they weren't observing beauty, they were surviving. A cell that could tell day from night knew when to rise toward warmth or retreat into safety. These were the first glimmers of sight, tiny patches of pigment that reacted to brightness, nothing more than molecular curiosity. But in evolution, curiosity is where everything begins. Over time, those patches deepened into small cups. The concave shape allowed creatures not just to feel light, but to sense its direction. It's like the difference between feeling warmth on your skin and knowing where the fire is. These primitive eyes could now detect motion, the quick shadow of a predator passing by, or the ripple of prey swimming near. Survival became sharper. The ocean began to fill with watchers. From cups, evolution carved chambers, small pits with narrow openings. The world came into focus, faint but distinct like light leaking through a keyhole. Then, somewhere along the line, nature added a lens. The lens could bend light, sharpen it, and focus it onto a layer of light-sensitive cells at the back of the eye. What we now call the retina. It was the biological equivalent of invention. The camera before humans even existed to name it. And here's where the story becomes almost poetic. The camera eye, that precise masterpiece of design, evolved not once but many times. Fish, squid and mammals all developed it separately. A perfect example of nature's endless patience with good ideas. Yet not all eyes are equal. The squid's eye, for instance, is technically better than ours. Its retina faces the right way. The light-sensitive cells are the first to receive the image. Ours are reversed, with nerves and blood vessels laid over the top, casting a small blind spot in each eye. It's like wiring a camera backwards and marvelling that it still works. And yet, somehow, it does. Our eyes turn that flawed design into something extraordinary. Millions of light receptors fire every second, translating photons, the smallest particles of light, into tiny electrical signals. Those signals travel along the optic nerve, reach the brain, and in less than an instant become colour, shape, and memory. You never see the raw light itself. You see your brain's gentle interpretation of it, the world rendered as meaning. Take a moment to notice that right now. Whatever light fills the room you're in, soft lamp glow, the pale reflection of a screen, the faint shimmer of dawn through curtains, all of it is ancient sunlight. Every photon that touches you tonight began its journey in the heart of a star. When you open your eyes, you're not just seeing, you are receiving cosmic history. Colour too has its lineage. The first eyes saw only brightness and darkness, but in the ocean's filtered light it became useful to distinguish hues. Red meant blood or coral, green meant food or algae, blue meant open depth. The world became painted by necessity. Today, your eyes use 3 kinds of receptors, one tuned to red light, one to green, one to blue. And from their combination you perceive the entire visible spectrum. But the truth is, visible only means what we can see. Bees see ultraviolet, snakes sense infrared. Each creature carries its own window into reality. We're all looking at the same world through different keys of the same symphony. There is gentle humour in knowing that even our sight, that most trusted of senses, is full of illusions. The blind spot we never notice, the colours that shift with light, the way our brain fills in missing details. All are proof that perception is not perfect, only useful. You don't need to see the world exactly as it is. You only need to see it well enough to live, to love, to recognise another face in the crowd. Eyes became more than tools, they became storytellers. From the reflective tapetum of a cat to the compound eyes of a dragonfly, from the deep-sea fish glowing with its own light to the human gaze shimmering with emotion, each carries a version of awareness shaped by its world. The human eye, with its white sclera and mobile brows, became a window not only for seeing but for being seen. When you look at someone, you're showing them where your mind rests. That tiny reflection of light in another's pupils is a silent connection between 2 histories of evolution. Close your eyes for a moment. Notice how quickly the world disappears, yet your mind still sees patterns, memories, the afterimage of light. Even in darkness, vision lingers, painting its quiet ghosts across the inside of your eyelids. That persistence of sight, the way your brain refuses to let go, is a kind of faith. It believes the world is still there, waiting to be seen again. If light is the language of the universe, then eyes are the translation. They turn energy into awareness, distance into intimacy. Every sunrise you've ever watched, every glint of reflection in water, every spark of curiosity, they're all echoes of that first organism that learned to follow the glow. Take one last gentle look around. The shapes, colours and movements around you are not separate from you. They are conversations between light and life, between ancient stars and your fragile perceiving mind. The act of seeing is the body's quiet reminder that the universe is still unfolding, still sending messages across time. And as we drift further into this story, another sense will rise to meet it. For where there is light, there is also vibration, the trembling of air that will become sound. Soon the world will learn not just to see, but to listen. If we follow the thread a little further, the story begins to hum. After light came vibration, after sight came sound, and the world, once silent, began to sing. The first song was not beautiful in the way we understand music now. It was the gentle tremor of water, the pulse of current, the faint thud of one body brushing against another. Long before there were ears, there was motion, and where there is motion, there is sound waiting to be heard. Imagine a calm ancient sea, perhaps 400 million years ago. Waves roll through it, pressing and releasing, making small fluctuations in pressure. Every movement sends ripples outward. Fish feel these ripples through delicate hair-like cells along their sides, tiny sensors embedded in skin, the lateral line. These primitive sensors detect disturbances, the flow of a predator's approach or the flick of prey darting away. They can't yet hear, but they can feel sound as touch. Vibration is the ancestor of hearing. Over generations, those simple hair cells grew more sensitive. They clustered into tiny chambers filled with fluid, amplifying every ripple that entered. At some point, a small portion of that system became enclosed inside the head, protected, specialized, precise. The first step toward an ear. Evolution was building a new kind of awareness, not just feeling vibration, but understanding its rhythm. When the descendants of fish began to crawl onto land, they carried those inner senses with them. But air is thinner than water. Vibrations needed a new pathway. The body adapted again. Thin membranes evolved, small stretched skins that could catch pressure waves in the air and pass them inward. These were the first eardrums, transforming invisible waves into motion once more. Sound had found a way to travel through air. In the process, some old bones found new jobs. Parts of the jaw that once helped fish bite and swallow began to shrink, shift, and migrate toward the middle ear. There they formed a tiny chain of 3 bones: the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. Each smaller than a grain of rice, yet together they became the most delicate machinery in the animal body. They bridged the gap between the eardrum and the inner ear, amplifying every tremor of air until even a whisper could move them. It's almost poetic. Bones that once chewed now learn to listen. They remind us that in evolution, nothing is wasted. Every structure can be repurposed, every failure retried. Those 3 bones still inside your head today are the quiet translators between world and thought. They turn the trembling of air into meaning. Deep inside, tucked in a spiral no bigger than a fingertip, lies the cochlea, a coiled chamber filled with fluid and lined with thousands of microscopic hairs. When vibration enters, the fluid moves like waves on a lake, brushing against those hairs. Each one responds to a specific frequency, some to low tones, others to high. Together they create the symphony of perception. It is your brain, not your ears, that decides what those waves mean. Every song, every laugh, every rustle of wind is first a pattern of pressure, then a spark of recognition. If you could listen closely enough, you'd hear your own body playing this music constantly. The heartbeat, the breath, the murmur of blood rushing past the eardrum. You're never truly in silence. Even in the quietest room, your inner orchestra continues. Some scientists call it the sound of life. There is a second gift hidden in the ear: balance. Near the cochlea lie 3 small curved canals filled with the same liquid and lined with the same sensory hairs. They are arranged at perfect right angles to one another, like the axis of space itself. When you tilt your head, the liquid moves. bending those hairs and telling your brain where up and down are. Without them, you couldn't stand, walk, or even focus your eyes properly. Your inner ear is both musician and navigator, playing harmony and gravity at once. Of course, like any old design, it has its quirks. When the liquid in those canals moves too much, after a sudden spin or a wild ride, your brain gets confused. The world tilts, your stomach protests, and dizziness sets in. It's evolution's small revenge for daring to stand upright and move too fast. The ear, like all great instruments, demands respect. Close your eyes for a moment and listen. What you hear right now, the hum of a room, the faint rush of your own breath, maybe even the rhythm of your heartbeat, is vibration made intimate. Sound is not a thing that exists outside you, it's a relationship. It only becomes real when something listens. Consider what a miracle that is. The same air that carries thunder also carries laughter. The same molecules that deliver the roar of a waterfall also deliver a whispered secret. Each sound, large or small, moves through space as a ripple of shared experience. Even the quiet between sounds matters. It's the pause that makes the next note meaningful. Evolution didn't create hearing to give us art or conversation. It created hearing for survival, to locate danger, to sense movement, to stay connected. But over time, we turned that survival tool into poetry. We made rhythm, language, song. The vibrations that once warned of predators now carry comfort and beauty. The heartbeat became a drum, the voice a melody, the world a stage of infinite tones. Think of how sound connects you to everything. When you speak, your voice sends waves of air that touch another person's eardrum, a physical link between two minds. When you hum to yourself, those same waves echo through your chest and bones, resonating from within. Sound is one of the few things you can feel from both sides, as giver and receiver, as pulse and response. And just as eyes let light in, ears let the world pass through you. You're both instrument and listener, always vibrating with what surrounds you. In a sense, the universe has been humming all along, waiting for something to recognize its tune. So as you sit here, listening to this quiet story, know that your ears are not just organs. They're gateways to memory, emotion, and empathy. To listen is to let another's vibration enter your silence. Every sound, from the crash of thunder to the sigh before sleep, is a reminder that you are part of something that moves, something alive. And as we drift deeper into this story, we'll meet the other half of this orchestra, the senses that taste and smell and touch, the ones that let the world not just be heard, but felt. From here, the story softens. We've seen how light became vision, how vibration became sound. But there are other senses, quieter, ones that root us in the immediate and the intimate. They do not deal in distance or precision. They speak in flavors, fragrances, and warmth. They remind the body not just that the world exists, but that we belong to it. Taste, smell, and touch. The oldest of all languages. Long before eyes and ears evolved, the first living things were already tasting and smelling. They didn't have tongues or noses, only tiny receptors on their surfaces that could sense the chemicals floating in water. One molecule meant danger, another meant food. This was survival at its simplest. Chemistry as awareness. Even today, your body still speaks that ancient dialect. Every time you taste sweetness or salt, you're decoding signals that life has known for billions of years. Taste began as a way of telling what was safe. Sweetness meant energy, the promise of sugar and quick fuel. Saltiness meant minerals, balance, and hydration. Sourness warned of ripeness or decay, bitterness of poison, umami of protein and nourishment. 5 basic flavors, 5 survival codes written in the tongue's soft surface. Your tongue is not a passive sponge. It's a map of microscopic sensors, each sending messages through nerves to the brain, asking, is this good for us? Will it keep us alive? But over time, those survival signals became pleasure. The brain began to reward good choices, the sweetness of fruit, the savour of cooked meat, the warmth of spice. The tongue's chemistry turned into emotion. That's why a familiar flavour can bring comfort, why hunger is both physical and poetic. To eat is to remember. The taste of bread, the tang of salt, the heat of tea, they all echo with the instincts of our ancestors. Smell deepens that memory even further. The sense of smell is ancient and direct, bypassing many of the brain's usual filters. The molecules that carry a scent are so small they can travel invisibly through the air, drift into your nose and bind to receptors that send signals straight to the limbic system, the seat of emotion and memory. That's why smell can move us in ways words can't. One breath of rain-soaked earth can carry you back years, to a season, a room, a person long gone. To smell is to breathe history. You're literally taking in fragments of the world, tiny bits of pollen, smoke, or skin, and turning them into feeling. The scent of fire is the scent of warmth and warning. The smell of the sea is salt and origin. The smell of another person is both chemistry and story. Our ancestors relied on smell not just to find food, but to find one another. The earliest forms of social recognition, family, mate, tribe, were carried on the wind. Even now, beneath all our perfumes and detergents, the nose still listens for signals of comfort and kinship. Then comes touch, the most primal of all. Before there was sight or sound or taste, there was contact, the gentle pressure of one thing against another. Single-celled organisms felt the push of current, the brush of a neighbour. That primitive awareness grew into the complex network of nerves that now weaves through your entire skin. Touch is everywhere. It's not contained in the fingers, it's in your lips, your back, your scalp, even deep inside your organs. It's the sense that tells you where you end and the world begins. The marvel of touch is its subtlety. Within your skin are millions of sensors tuned to different forms of contact, pressure, temperature, pain, texture. Some respond to sharp edges, others to softness. There are even special nerves that respond only to gentle, slow strokes. Scientists call them C-tactile fibers. These are the ones that make a comforting touch feel pleasant, that soothe you when someone holds your hand or brushes your arm. They are the biology of affection, the wiring of reassurance. Touch is also the body's first sense of self. As infants, we learn who we are through being held. Warmth, closeness, and heartbeat. These are the first languages we understand. Long before you learned a single word, your body already knew what safety felt like. That knowledge never leaves. Even as adults, a hug can slow the heart, a pat on the shoulder can ease fear, and a familiar texture can bring calm. In a world full of noise and light, touch is the reminder that connection is real. But touch is also fragile. Pain exists to protect us, to warn when pressure becomes too much. Without it, we'd burn, cut, or freeze without noticing. Even discomfort has a purpose. It's how the body says, please stop, please change, please care. Every sensation, pleasant or painful, is a kind of conversation between the world and your nerves. Take a quiet moment now. Rest your hand on something near you, a table, a pillow, your own arm. Notice the temperature, the weight, the texture. That simple act, so ordinary, is one of the oldest rituals of life. Your fingertips are reading a story written in atoms, molecules, and motion, all without a single word. You're feeling the physics of existence translated into comfort. Together, taste, smell, and touch are the body's bridge to memory and emotion. They make life vivid, personal, and human. They are not about measuring or analysing, but about belonging. Through them, the world comes inside you and becomes part of your story. When you share a meal, breathe in the scent of rain, or hold someone you love, you're performing the oldest exchange life ever invented. Even when sight dims and hearing fades, these senses remain. The smell of bread, the warmth of skin, the sweetness of fruit. They keep us tethered to the present, to each other. They are the world's way of saying, you are still here. You're still part of this. Take one last breath and let it linger. Notice how it feels, how the air moves through you, carrying scents you can't name. That movement, that tiny contact between the outer world and your inner self, is what it means to be alive. And as we drift further into this story, the senses that let the world in will meet the systems that keep it alive. Breath and blood, the quiet circulations that turn touch into heartbeat and air into life. Our quiet exploration now turns inward, to the simple act you're doing right now without thinking about it. Breathing. It seems so ordinary, so automatic that it's easy to forget what an extraordinary invention it really is. Every inhale, every exhale connects you to billions of years of life that learned to trade one element of the world for another, to take invisible air and turn it into energy, motion, and thought. Once, long ago, that air was not there to breathe. The Earth's early atmosphere was thick with gases unfit for lungs. Methane, carbon dioxide, water vapour. The oceans held tiny pioneers that produced oxygen as waste, changing the world slowly and dramatically. It was one of evolution's greatest transformations. The planet itself began to inhale and exhale. The first creatures with gills, delicate filaments fanned through water, learned to capture this new element, filtering life from liquid. In their rhythm, you can still hear the ocean's pulse, steady, soft, and patient. Gills worked beautifully in water. They let fish pull oxygen from currents and release carbon dioxide back into the sea. But as some fish ventured closer to shore, the oxygen in shallow pools often vanished. Breathing water alone was no longer enough. A few began to gulp at the surface, filling small sacs in their bodies with air. These sacs, over generations, became primitive lungs, soft sponges that could store air for the moments when water failed them. You could think of them as the first backup generators for life. When their descendants finally stepped onto land, those lungs became the main act, and from them the design has barely changed in hundreds of millions of years. Take a slow breath now. The air enters your nose or mouth, travels down the windpipe, and branches into smaller and smaller passages, like a tree turning upside down inside your chest. Each branch divides again and again until it ends in clusters of tiny sacs called alveoli. Inside those delicate chambers, something miraculous happens. Oxygen slips through a film thinner than silk and joins your blood, while carbon dioxide drifts out to be carried away with your next exhale. It is here, in those dewdrop chambers, that breath becomes life. No formulas, no equations, just exchange. One molecule arriving, another departing, all in silence. The surface area of those tiny sacs in your lungs, if unfolded, could cover an entire tennis court, all packed neatly into your chest. That vast landscape of breath is working for you now, unseen but constant every second of your life. Humans breathe using what biologists call negative pressure, but you could describe it more gently as invitation. When your diaphragm, that thin muscle below your lungs, contracts, it pulls downward, expanding the chest cavity. The pressure inside drops just enough to draw air inward, like opening a door to a breeze. You don't push air in, you make space for it, and the air accepts. Breathing is less a command than a welcome. That same rhythm, inhale, exhale, rise, fall, has been going on since the first amphibians stretched their necks toward the sky. Each breath you take tonight follows the same pattern they discovered in shallow ponds. It's the most universal ritual on Earth, shared by every creature with lungs or gills or even paws. Sometimes, when life feels overwhelming, it helps to remember that your body already knows how to find calm. The act of breathing deeply, of letting the air flow slowly in and out, sends quiet messages through your nerves. The heart slows, the muscles ease, the mind begins to trust that it's safe. You don't have to fight for balance. Your lungs are built to find it for you. Try it now if you'd like. Inhale gently through your nose. Imagine the air travelling down, branching, filling, touching every hidden corner of your lungs. Hold it for a heartbeat, then release it softly through your mouth. Somewhere, the air you just let go will rise, drift, and one day become someone else's breath. The same molecules travel endlessly, through forests, oceans, animals, and people. You are breathing what your ancestors once breathed, and someday someone else will breathe a piece of you. There is something deeply humbling in that. Air doesn't belong to anyone. It's the most generous thing the world offers. Every breath is a shared inheritance, moving through the ages like an invisible thread weaving all living things together. The word spirit itself comes from the same root as breath. To breathe is to be alive. To stop is to let go. Even when you're not aware of it, the lungs are working, rising and falling, about 20,000 times a day. When you run, they surge with energy. When you sleep, they slow into a lullaby. They adapt to mountains, deserts, oceans and cities, changing rhythm to fit every life. You can hold your breath for a while, but not forever. Breath will always return, patient, forgiving, endless. And like everything in evolution, the design is imperfect but sufficient. Lungs are vulnerable to smoke, to infection, to time. Yet they endure, repairing themselves, regrowing tissue, never fully resting. Their only true flaw is that they cannot hoard air. They can only borrow it. Life is built on that exchange. Take what you need, give what you can. So the next time you sigh or laugh or whisper to someone, remember that you're shaping the same air that once filled forests of ferns and lungs of dinosaurs. You are quite literally made of borrowed breath. The first gill breathers could never have imagined the music that would one day ride on their invention. Songs, words, laughter, entire languages carried on air. Take another slow breath and feel it for what it truly is. The continuation of an ancient conversation between body and world. Each inhale is a question, each exhale an answer, both written in the same soft rhythm of being alive. And within that rhythm, another pulse has always been waiting. The steady drumming of the heart, the second half of the body's music. Our quiet exploration now turns to the breath will meet its companion, and we'll listen to how the quiet pump at the centre of your chest keeps time for the entire symphony of life. If we follow the breath a little further inward, we arrive at the sound that has never left you. The slow, steady drumming in your chest. It's so familiar that you rarely hear it anymore, but it's there, keeping time for everything you do. The heart is the first organ to form when a body begins, and often the last to stop when it ends. Between those two moments, it never once takes a rest. Every second it works in silence, moving the breath you've just taken to every part of you. The earliest hearts were not hearts as we know them. They were just simple tubes, muscular channels that pulsed like peristaltic waves, squeezing fluid from one end to the other. You can still see this simplicity in some small sea creatures today, their clear bodies revealing a soft ripple that moves nutrients through them. There were no chambers, no valves, no rhythm, only persistence. But as life grew more complex, so did the need for circulation. Tiny, fragile cells deep inside a body could no longer rely on diffusion, on molecules wandering where they needed to go. They needed delivery. And so the tube evolved pockets, folds, and compartments. 2 chambers first, like a pump divided by a single door, then 3, then 4. Each new design brought a more efficient flow, more oxygen, more endurance. By the time mammals arrived, the heart had become a masterpiece of motion. 4 chambers, 2 loops, 1 continuous rhythm. You can imagine it as a small engine with two cycles. One half sends blood to the lungs, where it exchanges carbon dioxide for oxygen. The other half sends that oxygen-rich blood to the rest of the body. Then it all begins again. In, out, flow, return. A perfect loop of giving and receiving, balance made of emotion. The sound of a heartbeat, that familiar lub-dub, is nothing mystical. It's the sound of valves closing, of chambers refilling. Yet for all its mechanical clarity, it feels like something more, doesn't it? That quiet percussion has been a soundtrack for every feeling you've ever had. It speeds up when you're frightened or thrilled, slows when you're calm or asleep. It plays along with your laughter, your worry, your dreams. You could almost say the heart listens to the emotions it helps create. The liquid it moves is a living river, blood, carrying oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and heat through a vast network of vessels that, if stretched end to end, would circle the planet several times. Your arteries and veins are tributaries of this inner landscape, and at the centre of it all, the heart is both spring and sea. Every minute it sends out about 5 litres of blood, more than 2,000 gallons a day, and it never complains. Inside that blood are tiny couriers of oxygen called red cells. Each one is filled with a molecule named hemoglobin, which you can think of as a tiny ferryboat made of iron. Oxygen binds to it, rides along for a while, and then hops off where it's needed, in muscles, in organs, in the brain. Then the hemoglobin carries carbon dioxide back for release. It's a perfect delivery service that never stops running. The iron at its centre is what gives your blood its colour, the same metal found in the hearts of stars. In a very real sense, you carry starlight in your veins. The heart structure is elegantly simple, yet its work is endless. 4 chambers, 2 atria above, 2 ventricles below, contracting in precise sequence. The rhythm begins not from the brain, but from a small cluster of cells inside the heart itself, the sinoatrial node. It's your natural pacemaker, a tiny metronome made of living tissue. Even if every nerve were cut, that cluster would keep beating slow and steady as long as it had oxygen. You don't have to tell your heart to keep going. It already knows how. Take a moment to feel it now. Place a hand over your chest and notice the soft vibration beneath your palm. That's not just muscle, it's history. That pattern of contraction has been passed down from the first organisms that learned to pulse. Their rhythm became ours. The same ancient beat that once pushed seawater through a jellyfish now pushes blood through you. You are, in this sense, still part of that ocean, your body, a tide that rises and falls every second. Of course, like everything built by evolution, the design is not flawless. The heart can fail, stumble, clog, or tire. It is strong, but not indestructible, and yet, despite its vulnerability, it endures astonishing strain, pumping billions of times across a lifetime, adapting to fever, altitude, stress, and sleep. The heart may be mechanical in motion, but its resilience borders on miraculous. If the lungs are the forest, the heart is the wind that moves through them, invisible but essential. Every time it beats, it keeps that forest alive. You could think of it as the drummer of the body's symphony, the one who keeps time while every other instrument plays its part, and like any good drummer, when it falters, the music stops. That's why every heartbeat matters, even the ones you don't feel. There's a quiet humour in how much we ask of it. We trust it completely, even though we barely notice it. It carries us through panic and joy, through fear and rest. It speeds when we chase what we love, slows when we hold what we cherish. The heart is a workaholic you never hired but can't live without. And even when it aches, metaphorically or physically, that ache is proof that it's still trying. When you were a tiny cluster of cells, before you had eyes or hands or even a spine, a pulse began within you. It was not yet a heartbeat, but a simple rhythm, an echo of the motion that keeps everything alive. That beat continues now, stronger, steadier, and it will go on for as long as it can. The heart doesn't ask for thanks, but it deserves it. So take a deep breath and imagine the path it takes, from lungs to arteries, through veins and back again. Each heartbeat is a small act of giving, a promise renewed. Somewhere within its chambers, there's the memory of the first pulse of life on Earth, that first expansion and contraction that said, "I will continue." From this point, the world opens in a new direction. That rhythm will carry us toward a new kind of electricity, the flicker of thought and the quiet storm of nerves. The same pulse that moves blood through your body will soon travel as signals through your mind, turning touch into emotion and memory into awareness. From the steady rhythm of the heart, the story now rises into electricity, the flickers of communication that connect one part of life to another. Where the heart beats with muscle, the mind begins to shimmer with signal. Thought, after all, is not made of substance but of movement. Waves of energy running through networks so ancient they began long before there were brains to contain them. If we drift backward again, far into the seas of prehistory, we would find the first faint sparks of this system in the simplest of creatures. Jellyfish, corals, anemones. They had no organs, no central control, no head to think with, yet their bodies pulsed with light. They used threads of specialized cells that could send tiny bursts of electricity from one part of their body to another. When touched, the message raced through their tissues, telling them to contract, to glow, to move. This, in a way, was the world's first conversation, life speaking to itself through charge. Those early systems were nerve nets, diffuse webs of communication spread evenly across the body. You might call them the ocean's original Wi-Fi. They carried no thoughts, only reactions, but even reaction is the beginning of awareness. A jellyfish doesn't plan, but it feels. It senses water pressure, temperature, light, the faint brush of another creature. These were the first sparks of what would become the nervous system, an invisible network connecting sensation to action. Then came structure. As animals grew longer, with front and back ends, evolution discovered the advantage of putting decision-making up front. If the world comes at you from one direction, it helps to keep your senses and responses there too. This was cephalization, the gathering of senses toward a head, and along with them, the beginnings of thought. Picture a small worm wriggling through sand hundreds of millions of years ago. It has a simple nerve cord running the length of its body, with a thicker knot of neurons near the front. A proto-brain. This cluster doesn't imagine or remember, but it can choose. Turn left, turn right, stop, continue. Intention, however small, has entered the world. From these beginnings, the nervous system branched and refined itself. Fish developed spinal cords, long highways of nerves connecting brain to body. Signals travelled faster, more efficiently, like light following a wire. Eventually, some animals evolved protective casings of bone and cartilage, skulls and spines, to guard these fragile currents. The body had already built architecture, now it was building communication lines within it. Each nerve fibre carries its messages using the smallest possible spark. Within every neuron, ions, tiny charged particles of sodium, potassium and calcium, trade places across a membrane, creating a pulse of energy that races down the cell. But instead of describing it as chemistry, you might picture it as lightning slowed down to a whisper, tiny flashes leaping from one end of the cell to the other, over and over, billions of times each second. These flashes reach the end of the neuron, where they trigger another set of signals, chemical messengers that drift across narrow gaps to pass the impulse along. It's a dance of light and molecules, so fast and constant that together they form what we call a thought. In humans, This network contains roughly 86 billion neurons. But numbers don't capture the wonder of it. Each neuron may connect to thousands of others, creating a web so dense that it rivals the galaxies in complexity. Yet all of it operates silently, invisibly, in the darkness behind your eyes. Every movement, memory, dream, or sigh begins as a single flicker in that darkness. The first creatures with real brains, early fish, amphibians, and reptiles, gained power through coordination. A fast nervous system meant fast reactions. Predator and prey became locked in an evolutionary race of reflexes. Later, mammals added layers of control, emotion, and anticipation. But underneath it all, the same principle endures. The neuron firing, the impulse travelling, the signal arriving. You can think of your body as an orchestra of electricity. When you reach for a cup, thousands of neurons fire in perfect sequence. Eyes noticing the object, brain deciding, arm moving, hand closing. The entire act takes less than half a second. The timing is so smooth that you rarely notice how miraculous it is. You're directing lightning with every gesture. And yet, despite all this speed and power, the system is fragile. A single misfire can cause tremor, paralysis, or confusion. The brain's brilliance lies in its balance. Enough stability to hold identity, enough chaos to create imagination. Thought lives in that balance, poised between order and possibility. Take a moment to feel it. Behind your eyes, beneath your scalp, within the folds of your brain, countless impulses are moving now, sending information about temperature, pressure, sound, and light. You don't feel them, but they shape every perception. The soft hum you sense when you close your eyes isn't silence at all. It's the current of being alive. When you see a flash of lightning in the sky, you're witnessing energy on a grand scale. Inside you, that same phenomenon is happening endlessly, quietly. A storm of electricity keeps your body thinking, remembering, and moving. You are, in the most literal sense, a creature of light, powered by controlled thunder. If there's something humbling about that, there's also something comforting. The same forces that sculpt clouds and spark storms also flow through your nervous system right now, choosing words, imagining faces, guiding your breath. Matter learned to move, and in moving, it learned to feel. This perhaps is the real miracle, that awareness came not from outside, but from within. The brain did not descend from the heavens, it rose from the sea. It is salt water and electricity organized into curiosity. Every thought you have is a continuation of that long lineage, stretching from jellyfish to poets. The trail of time leads us gently into. The spark will deepen. The network that reacts will begin to remember. Nerve nets will give rise to minds that not only sense but also dream. Minds that imagine futures, recall the past, and feel compassion. The story of the nervous system will soon become the story of emotion. The lightning will learn to love. If we follow those sparks a little further, they begin to gather, folding into something new. The simple network that once reacted now starts to reflect. The lightning learns not only to move, but to remember its own paths. Thought takes on shape, not as calculation, but as awareness. And from awareness grows emotion. It's strange to think that the same substance that makes your fingernails also makes your memories. The brain is not glass or crystal or circuitry. It's soft, a quiet mass of folded tissue, mostly water and fat pulsing with chemistry. Yet inside it, entire worlds rise and fall every moment. When mammals appeared, their brains expanded dramatically. The outer layer, the neocortex, became a map of imagination. In that thin grey film lies everything you've ever seen, heard, or dreamed. It holds the picture of a friend's smile, the echo of a song, the scent of rain, the memory of a moment you can't explain but can still feel. Every one of those is a pattern of connections, strengthened and reshaped each time you recall it. Remembering is not like opening a file. It's more like replaying music by ear, slightly different each time, a little softer, a little warmer. Within that forest of neurons, some began to specialize in empathy. Scientists call them mirror neurons, but you might think of them as emotional echoes. When you see someone smile, your own brain fires the same pattern, a faint rehearsal of their joy. When you witness pain, your body tenses as if to share it. This mirroring is not learned, it's inherited. It's the biological root of compassion, the reason we flinch when another is hurt or tear up when someone laughs uncontrollably. The brain didn't evolve to be perfect, it evolved to be useful. It is full of shortcuts, biases and improvisations, a masterpiece of good enough. Sometimes it races ahead of logic, sometimes it lags behind the heart. But its very flaws make it flexible. The ability to imagine danger before it arrives, or to hope before there's reason. Those are mistakes that became miracles. You might picture your thoughts as streams of water flowing through soft earth. Each time you think the same thought, the water carves the path a little deeper. Habits, emotions, memories, they are grooves in that landscape. The beauty of the brain is that it can reshape those grooves, filling in old paths and forming new ones. Even in age, it remains alive with potential, a garden that never stops growing. Deep within, beneath the folds and logic, lies an older region, the limbic system. This is the seat of instinct, emotion, and memory. When your heart races or your stomach tightens, it's this ancient core speaking before words arrive. It remembers what danger feels like, what comfort feels like, and it still commands much of your behaviour. We like to imagine we are creatures of intellect, but the truth is gentler. We are creatures of feeling, with thought built delicately around it. And then, below even that, something remarkable. A dialogue between your brain and your gut. In your intestines, a second nervous system hums quietly, a network of millions of neurons, almost as many as in the spinal cord. It governs digestion, but it also talks back to the brain, influencing mood, appetite, and emotion. This second brain doesn't think in words, but in chemistry. It releases signals that can make you anxious or calm, drawn or repelled. When you say you have a gut feeling, it's not just a metaphor, it's communication. Your thoughts are not confined to your skull, they ripple through your whole body. The more we learn about the brain, the more it seems like an ecosystem, not a machine. It thrives on balance, on the cooperation between chaos and order, reason and feeling. Every night as you sleep, it cleans and rewires itself. Neurons fire in patterns that sift the day's experience, turning chaos into narrative. In dreams, the brain rehearses without consequence. It tests possibilities, stores lessons, and creates art from memory. Even when you rest, it's busy weaving meaning out of motion. Try to imagine, if you can, the scale of this activity. Each of your roughly 86 billion neurons can form thousands of connections, and each connection can change strength in milliseconds. The number of possible brain states you can occupy exceeds the number of atoms in the observable universe. And yet all of that complexity serves the simplest purpose: to keep you alive, to help you connect, to let you love and be loved. Sometimes people say the brain is the most complicated thing in the universe, but that might not be quite right. The brain is the universe, or at least a reflection of it. The same physical laws that govern stars and storms govern your thoughts. The same atoms that once burned in distant suns now create your memories. Consciousness is the cosmos learning to observe itself, one fragile mind at a time. It's easy to think of intelligence as cold or detached, but our kind of intelligence is soaked in feeling. We think best when we care, remember deepest when we love, imagine most vividly when we're moved. The brain's genius is not its reason, it's its warmth. Take a moment to notice your own mind now, not your thoughts themselves, but the space that holds them. Feel the quiet hum behind your awareness, the pulse of attention that flickers and fades. That space is not empty, it's alive, full of movement and colour and echo. You don't need to name it or measure it, just let it be. Evolution didn't plan for consciousness to happen. It simply happened because life kept getting better at noticing itself. A creature that could sense danger survived. A creature that could remember survived longer. A creature that could imagine, love, grieve, and hope. That creature built stories, tools, and art. Somewhere along the line, neurons began to whisper, "I am," and that whisper has never stopped. Every dream, every idea, every heartbeat that you notice, every quiet joy that rises uninvited, they're all continuations of that first spark. The lightning that once flashed in the ocean now flickers in the folds of your mind. The journey continues, unfolding into, that spark will find its hands, thought will become action, and imagination will reach into the world. The same brain that learned to feel will soon learn to shape, through touch, through creation, through the soft miracle of the human hand. From the quiet storm of the brain, the story now flows into motion, into the instrument that made thought tangible, that turned imagination into reality, the human hand. It may not seem like much when you look at it, just a collection of bones and joints, tendons and skin, but within its simple shape lies the history of our species. The hand is evolution's signature, the point where mind and matter first learn to collaborate. If you stretch out your hand now and study it for a moment, you're looking at the end of a 400 million year experiment. It began in the fins of fish, broad paddles designed to push through water. Inside those fins were bones arranged, in a now familiar pattern, one bone near the body, two in the middle, many near the end. That pattern never vanished, it simply adapted. As some fish began to venture onto land, those fins stiffened, turning into limbs that could press against the ground. Over millions of years, that same basic architecture was reshaped into legs for walking, wings for flying, and eventually hands for holding. In the earliest mammals, the forelimbs became more versatile. They reached, grasped, and carried. Claws turned to nails, allowing for finer control, but it was in primates, our distant cousins swinging through ancient forests, that the hand took its greatest leap. The thumb rotated inward, meeting the fingers in opposition. Suddenly, the hand could grip not just branches but objects. That simple twist, that small mechanical miracle, opened a new world of possibility. The opposable thumb was not just a feature, it was a revolution. With it, creatures could build, shape, and share. It allowed for tools, and with tools came everything else. Cooking, art, shelter, culture. You could say the thumb gave birth to civilization. Every stone knife, every fire-starting spark, every drawing on a cave wall, all of it began as the quiet curiosity of a hand exploring what it could do. Over time, our hands grew more expressive than powerful. They became lighter, finer, capable of delicacy rather than brute force. The fingertips filled with sensory nerves, thousands in every square centimetre, making them some of the most sensitive surfaces on Earth. When you touch something, the texture you feel is not just skin against surface, it's an orchestra of tiny signals racing through your nerves, creating a picture of contact. You don't merely touch the world, you read it. That sensitivity did more than allow us to build, it taught us empathy. When you hold another person's hand, the warmth you feel isn't symbolic. It's literal information, carried through nerves and interpreted by the same brain regions that process emotion. Touch and emotion became inseparable. In every gesture, a handshake, a caress, a small wave goodbye, the hand communicates what words often can't. Our relationship with tools shaped us in return. As we learned to grip stones and branches, the muscles of our hands refined and our brains expanded to manage this new complexity. Toolmaking didn't just change the world, it rewired the mind. The loop between hand and thought became self-reinforcing. The more we shaped, the more we imagined. The more we imagined, the more we shaped. Cooking was one of the hand's greatest collaborations with fire. Hands learned to tend flame, to prepare food, to soften what was once inedible. Cooked meals gave more energy with less chewing, freeing time and nutrition for brain growth. You might say that fire fed the mind, but it was the hand that served the meal. Even now, your hands remain storytellers. They type, write, paint, sculpt, repair. They hold tools that extend their reach, from pens to pianos to spacecraft controls. The same bones that once pushed mud at the bottom of a river now press keys that send words across the world. The anatomy has not changed much, only the imagination behind it has. Look at your palms again. Each line, each callus, each tiny scar tells a story of how you've used them, what you've built, who you've touched, what you've held and released. The hands remember what the mind forgets. They carry muscle memory, rhythm and instinct. You may forget a song, but your fingers might still know how to play it. You may forget the exact recipe, but your hands will recall how the dough felt when it was ready. There's humour in how much identity lives in something so ordinary. We speak with our hands, gesture without realising, punctuate our thoughts with motion. Even in silence, they reveal what we feel. Fidgeting, folding, trembling, comforting. They are extensions of emotion as much as tools of logic. Imagine for a moment how your hands connect you to the rest of life. A bird's wing, a whale's fin, a bat's span of bone and skin, all follow the same pattern. Evolution didn't invent new plans, it modified old ones. Every living creature that moves carries a variation of the same theme. You are, in a sense, still that fish testing the edge of the water, still that primate reaching for the next branch. And yet, the human hand became something more than survival's instrument. It became the artist's brush, the scientist's lens, the caregiver's touch. It became the way we make meaning visible. Through it, thought leaves the confines of the mind and becomes part of the world. Every painting, every invention, every act of kindness is a fingerprint of consciousness. If you rest your hands now, one over the other, you might feel a faint pulse beneath your skin, the echo of the same heartbeat we listened to earlier. That rhythm feeds them, powers them, keeps them warm. In each small motion, that pulse meets purpose. Even the smallest gesture, stirring tea, tying a knot, brushing away a tear, carries the entire lineage of movement within it. Our ancestors once used their hands to survive. We use them now to create. But beneath every creation still lies that first instinct, to reach. The hand is the body's promise that the world is within touch. It is curiosity made flesh. From this stillness, another wonder appears, that same hunger to connect will turn inward again, to the system that nourishes the body's core, the long and winding tube that transforms what we take in into life itself. The hands may shape the world, but the body must still find a way to feed from it. Inside us, that story continues in secret, in the gentle chemistry of digestion. From the hand that shapes the world, we turn inward again, into the quiet machinery that keeps every creation alive. Beneath thought and motion, beneath every heartbeat, lies a long, winding passage that does its work in darkness. It doesn't plan, doesn't think, doesn't stop. It takes what the world offers, transforms it, and returns energy to every corner of your body. This is the digestive system, or more poetically, the tube that eats the world and turns it into you. In the beginning, there was no inside and outside. The first living things absorbed nutrients directly through their membranes, allowing molecules to drift in and out like tides through seaweed. But as life grew larger, diffusion wasn't enough. Food needed a path, an entry, a journey, an exit. Somewhere in the deep past, a creature developed a passageway that went all the way through. It was the first through gut, a simple tunnel with 2 doors. From that moment, life became a traveller within itself. That basic design has never really changed. You too are built around a long continuous tube, starting at the mouth, ending at the other side, coiled, folded and tucked neatly into your body. If you could unfold it, it would stretch nearly 9 meters end to end, and every centimetre of it is alive with motion. The walls of this inner tunnel contract and release in waves, a process called peristalsis, a kind of muscular choreography that moves food forward even when you're asleep. The rhythm never falters. It's the same slow wave that once pushed seawater through the gills of your ancestors. Food itself is only the beginning. Once inside, it becomes raw material for chemistry. The mouth starts the symphony. Teeth crush and tear. Saliva breaks starch into sweetness. The tongue shapes everything into a swallowable rhythm. Down in the stomach, acid and enzymes take over, a bubbling cauldron that dissolves what teeth could not. The stomach doesn't simply burn, it measures, stirs, releases. When it's ready, it passes the softened mixture into the small intestine, where the true magic happens. If you imagine the stomach as a cauldron, then the small intestine is a forest. Its walls are lined with tiny folds, and each fold is covered in smaller ones, microscopic villi that look like soft grass waving in an invisible wind. Every movement of this living landscape draws nutrients into the bloodstream. The surface area, if you could spread it out flat, would cover more ground than a tennis court, all contained within your abdomen. Through those countless tiny roots, your body drinks from the world. And you're not alone in this forest. Trillions of microbes, bacteria, fungi and viruses, we live there with you. They are your silent collaborators, breaking down fibres you can't digest, producing vitamins, balancing your immune system. Together, they form the microbiome, a bustling city inside you. For every human cell in your body, there may be an equal number of these microbial partners. You're not a single creature, but an ecosystem, a collaboration billions of years in, the making. These microscopic citizens are chatty. They send chemical messages to your brain through nerves and hormones, influencing mood and appetite. When you crave a particular food, it may not just be you wanting it. It may be the voices of your microbes whispering suggestions from the inside. It's a strange thought, but also a comforting one. Your body is a democracy, and every tiny vote counts. The process of digestion is so seamless that you rarely notice it, unless something goes wrong. But inside, it's a constant transformation. Proteins become amino acids, fats melt into energy, sugars into warmth. What enters your mouth as matter leaves your cells as motion. You are, quite literally, powered by the breakdown of sunlight. Plants capturing energy, animals eating plants, you eating both. The world flows through you in an endless exchange. Cooking changed that exchange forever. When our ancestors learned to use fire, food became softer, safer, and richer in energy. Cooked meals reduced the need for large jaws and heavy teeth. Over generations, the face became smaller, the brain larger. Fire fed more than hunger, it fed culture. Meals became moments of gathering, planning, storytelling. The hearth was the first classroom, the first parliament, the first theatre. The act of eating together became the architecture of society. And the humour in it all is that this entire miracle is powered by a tube. You could say evolution built the world's most elegant plumbing system, one that fuels art, philosophy and laughter without ever demanding attention. It doesn't ask for praise, only nourishment. It doesn't complain, only adapts. It turns apple into breath, grain into thought, sunlight into memory. If you listen closely to your own body, really listen, you can hear faint echoes of this hidden machinery. The gurgles, the hums, the soft murmurs after a meal are the sounds of life working behind the scenes. Every cell is waiting for its share, every organ tuned to the same rhythm of transformation. Even when you sleep, that symphony continues. The body is always at work, turning the world into tomorrow's energy. The next time you eat, pause for a heartbeat before the first bite. Look at the food, not with hunger, but with gratitude. What you're about to consume is not just fuel, it's history. It's sunlight caught by leaves, water carried through clouds, soil nurtured by unseen roots. You're taking in pieces of the planet, letting them become part of your heartbeat, your laughter, your next thought. If the lungs connect you to the air, and the heart connects you to motion, the digestive system connects you to everything else, to earth, to water, to life itself. You're not separate from the world you consume. You are the world rearranged. Take a slow breath and imagine that unseen forest within you, busy and bright. Its roots are in everything you've ever eaten. Its branches in every cell that depends on it. The tube inside you is not just an organ. It's a story of transformation written in motion and time. And from that nourishment, another transformation will follow. A change not of chemistry, but of posture, of perspective. For once, life had learned to feed itself. It learned to stand, to lift its gaze from the ground and to look toward the sky. From the quiet inner rhythm of digestion, the story now rises back into the light, into motion once again. Having learned to breathe, to pump, to eat, and to think, life was ready for a new challenge, to lift itself from the ground, to stand upright, to balance, to walk beneath the open sky. What began as a simple shift in posture would become one of evolution's boldest architectural experiments, a reimagining of the entire body to meet the gaze of the horizon. It started, as so many great changes do, with the earth itself. Around 6 million years ago, the lush forests of Africa began to thin. Climate patterns shifted, the canopy opened into wide grasslands. The air grew hotter, the distances between trees longer. For creatures adapted to climbing and swinging, this was a problem. Food and safety were now scattered across open ground. To survive, some of our ancestors began to walk more often on 2 feet, not just to move, but to see. Standing up meant catching the glimmer of fruit in a faraway tree, or spotting a predator before it saw you. The body responded slowly, reshaping itself to meet this new world. You might imagine it as nature performing an enormous redesign project. The spine re-engineered, the hips tilted, the legs strengthened, the feet rebuilt from flexible grabbers into solid arches. The change was not graceful at first. To balance on 2 limbs required the body to twist and curve. The spine, once horizontal, bent into an S shape, distributing weight like a spring. The pelvis widened to support organs against gravity's pull. Knees began to lock when straightened, saving energy with every step. The foot, once splayed like a hand, condensed into a rigid platform with a strong heel for impact and toes that could push off with force. Piece by piece, the animal that once knuckle-walked like its cousins learned to stride. You can trace that architecture within yourself. Every step you take is a small miracle of balance. A constant conversation between muscles, bones, and the inner ear. One leg lifts while the other supports. The hips rotate. The spine flexes. The head stays level. The brain calculates adjustments faster than thought. Walking feels simple, but it is the result of an intricate ballet happening every fraction of a second. To walk upright meant freedom, but also vulnerability. Standing made the body taller and slower to flee. The spine, under constant vertical pressure, became prone to pain. The pelvis, reshaped for balance, narrowed the birth canal, making childbirth far more dangerous. These were heavy costs, but the benefits outweighed them. Hands freed from locomotion could now carry, throw and build. Eyes could scan the distance. The skin could sweat efficiently, cooling the body during long pursuits. This last advantage, endurance, would define our species. Humans are not the fastest runners, nor the strongest, but they can outlast almost any animal on Earth. In the heat of day, our ancestors could walk and jog across vast savannas while their prey overheated and collapsed. Endurance hunting turned patience into power. The same posture that allowed us to stand also made us the planet's quiet marathoners. Walking changed not only our bodies, but our minds. It freed our gaze, encouraging imagination. With each step, the horizon stretched a little further. When you walk, your brain doesn't rest. It wanders, it creates, it connects. Many of history's great thinkers and poets found their ideas not at desks, but on foot. The gentle rhythm of walking seems to untangle thoughts, syncing the pace of the body with the flow of the mind. Even now, a slow stroll can calm anxiety and invite reflection, a conversation between your feet and your thoughts. Walking also changed our social lives. Early humans began travelling together, foraging and migrating in groups. Cooperation became survival. Moving side by side, they shared stories, carried children, and passed down knowledge with each journey. The act of walking together became an act of belonging, a ritual we still carry in every stroll with a friend or hike with family. When you walk beside someone, your steps eventually fall into sync, your pace harmonizing without effort. The body recognizes connection long before words do. If you listen to your footsteps now, whether on pavement, wood, or soil, you're hearing the echo of that ancient discovery. The soft rhythm of heel, toe, lift, and fall is the same rhythm that carried our ancestors through deserts and meadows. Every step you take today repeats a pattern that once meant survival. But for all its practical benefits, there's something quietly spiritual about walking. Its motion balanced perfectly between stillness and flight. To walk is to trust the ground, to fall forward and catch yourself, again and again. Each step is a small act of faith in gravity's cooperation. You lean, you let go, and you move. The next time you find yourself walking, maybe through a park, along a beach, or even across your living room, try to feel the geometry beneath the motion. Notice how the pelvis tilts, how the spine shifts, how the arms swing in counterbalance. The design may not be flawless, but it's resilient. It's the same design that once carried people across continents, that built cities, that reached the poles, that walked on the moon. The blueprint was written long before ambition arrived. And yet, with every improvement came fragility. Our upright posture gave us vision and freedom, but it also gave us aching backs, worn knees, and sore feet. Standing up was evolution's boldest architectural gamble, elegant, risky, and entirely human. We've been perfecting our balance ever since. In the quiet hours of night, when the world slows, imagine those first creatures rising on two legs beneath a vast golden sky. Their shadows stretched long behind them, their arms swaying awkwardly as they took uncertain steps into history. Each stride was a question. Can this work? And the answer, millions of years later, is you. Take a breath and feel your spine straighten. Feel your weight shift gently from one foot to the other. That small sway you feel is the same motion that once crossed continents. Every step you've ever taken carries the memory of that first upright moment when life stopped crawling and began to walk toward its future. And with walking came something more than survival. It brought connection, faces turning toward one another, voices forming sounds, emotions finding shape. The body that stood upright would soon learn to speak, to smile, to blush, to sing. And slowly the story carries us onward, we'll see how evolution turned posture into poetry, how the social body emerged capable of kindness, language, and love. From the rhythm of walking, the story turns now toward connection, toward the ways our bodies began to communicate long before words ever formed. To stand upright freed our hands, but it also freed our faces. It let us look into each other's eyes, read emotion, and share understanding. Somewhere along the long road of evolution, survival stopped being a solitary effort. It became something shared, a story written not in DNA alone, but in expressions, voices, and touch. If you look in a mirror, the face that looks back at you is a masterpiece of subtle engineering. Beneath the skin, 43 tiny muscles lie woven together like threads in a tapestry. Each one can move independently or in concert, pulling the corners of your mouth, lifting your eyebrows, widening your eyes. Together they can create thousands of combinations: joy, fear, curiosity, doubt, tenderness. Most of the time you don't even notice you're using them. A raised brow, a tilt of the head, a softening around the eyes. All are conversations happening faster than language. No other animal communicates emotion so richly through the face. Our close primate relatives can grimace, pout, and bare their teeth. But their eyes are dark, their sclerae, the white part of the eye, barely visible. Humans evolved large, visible sclera that reveal where we're looking. This simple change transformed communication. You can tell what someone else is paying attention to, even from across a room. Eyes became not just windows to the soul, but mirrors of intent. There's one reason we trust gaze so deeply. To meet another's eyes is to feel momentarily seen in return. And then, of course, there's the smile, perhaps our most universal gesture. A genuine smile, known as the Duchenne smile, lifts both the mouth and the corners of the eyes. It's named for a 19th century French neurologist who discovered that true happiness cannot be faked easily. The muscles around the eyes will always tell the truth. We've been decoding each other's authenticity ever since. A smile isn't just a signal, it's contagious. When you see one, mirror neurons in your brain often trigger a faint echo, a small tug at your own lips. Emotion travels face to face, a current of empathy shared through muscle and light. But not every signal is comfortable. Blushing, for example, may be the body's most disarming confession. It's an involuntary flush of blood to the cheeks triggered by embarrassment or guilt, a biological apology note written in colour. No other species does it quite like we do. It's our way of saying without words, I mean no harm. Paradoxically, that vulnerability often inspires trust. Honesty, after all, glows. The face became our most expressive instrument, but evolution didn't stop there. Inside the throat, another quiet transformation was taking place. The voice box, or larynx, began to descend lower in the neck, giving humans a wider range of tones. It was a trade-off, a gift and a risk. With a lowered larynx came melody, laughter and language, but also the possibility of choking. Evolution gambled safety for song, and the bet paid off spectacularly. The breath that once powered survival cries and warning calls became music. Through fine control of air and vibration, our ancestors learned to shape meaning with sound. First grunts and hums, then words and stories. The same column of air that fills your lungs to sustain life also leaves your body to connect it to others. In that sense, every word is shared breath, the atmosphere of one person entering the lungs of another. Conversation is a literal exchange of air. Language allowed us to coordinate, to teach, to imagine together. We could share not just what is, but what could be. We could plan hunts, build shelters, create myths. But underneath the language, the voice never stopped being emotional. A single word can carry affection or anger, longing or loss, depending on tone. Even in silence, the rhythm of breath between two people can say everything word can't. Touch completed the circle. We began life as creatures who held and were held. Long before we spoke, we were comforted by warmth, by closeness, by heartbeat. That need never left us. When we hug, when we rest a hand on someone's shoulder, when we offer a gentle pat of reassurance, the brain releases oxytocin, a hormone of trust and bonding. It slows the heart, softens anxiety, and reminds the body it belongs. Touch is the body's oldest promise. You are not alone. You can see the traces of this in every culture on Earth. A handshake, a bow, a kiss on the cheek, a simple nod. They're all echoes of that same instinct to connect, to say I see you. Even gossip, that most human of habits, has its evolutionary roots. Sharing information about others built cooperation, reputation, and protection. You might say we gossip, therefore we thrive. And through all this, the face, the voice, the touch, something profound happened. Survival began to depend not only on strength or speed, but on kindness. Groups that cooperated endured. Those that could communicate, comfort and forgive had better chances. Survival of the fittest slowly gave way to survival of the kindest. Compassion became an evolutionary advantage. Think for a moment of your own body as an instrument of connection. The way your face changes when you listen closely. The tone of your voice when you speak softly to someone you love. The instinct to reach out a hand when words fail. None of these are accidents. They're the body remembering its purpose. To belong, to communicate, to be seen and understood. Take a slow breath now and imagine all the small exchanges that happen in a single day. A shared glance, a nod from a stranger, the laughter of a friend. Each one is a miniature thread, weaving you back into the great network of living things. The same body that once struggled to stand has now learned to reach outward in empathy. We are social by design, emotional by necessity. The body, in all its complexity, is built to connect, to read, respond, and resonate with others. You are the continuation of that long experiment, proof that communication can be both physical and spiritual. And as we drift gently into the final part of this story, we'll look at what remains after all the systems, senses, and structures, the story of memory itself. Because in the end, the body is not just a machine or a vessel. It is a living museum of time, carrying every moment, every adaptation, every whisper of its ancestors within you. And so, we arrive at the quiet end of our journey, to the body not as machinery, not as invention, but as memory. Every cell, every bone, every rhythm inside you is a small exhibit in the museum of time. The story of evolution is not something that happened long ago. It's happening still. Every breath, every heartbeat, every strand of hair growing quietly in the dark. You're not separate from the history of life. You are its continuation. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine walking through that museum. In one room, you'd see the shimmer of the ancient sea where life began. Single-celled beings drifting like dust motes in sunlight. In another, the forest of your lungs, filled with the same air those creatures first created. The hall of your spine rises next, a column of bones remembering the first fish that needed structure. Every step you take echoes that early struggle for balance and motion. You are built of memory shaped into form. The bones in your hands still whisper the language of fins. Your ears still remember the rhythm of water. The salt in your blood is the ocean that never left you. When you cry, your tears have almost the same chemistry as the sea. Even your breath carries that inheritance. Oxygen exchanged in alveoli like dew on coral, carbon dioxide returned to the air like waves breaking against the shore. You are, quite literally, a tide that learned to think. Look closer, and you'll see that imperfection itself is part of the design. The human body is not a masterpiece of efficiency, but of adaptation. The spine that lets us stand also curves and aches. The eyes that see the stars have blind spots. The throat that lets us sing can choke. These are not flaws to be ashamed of. They are reminders that you are the result of 1,000 experiments that almost failed. Survival is not perfection, it's persistence with personality. In every movement, the past lives on. When you laugh, you use muscles once meant for breathing. When you dream, your brain replays ancient instincts. The fear of falling, the thrill of flight, the longing to belong. Even the emotions that feel most human are rooted in older systems that kept our ancestors alive. Love, grief, curiosity, all are refinements of simpler needs: to connect, to protect, to understand. Evolution did not erase its past designs. It repurposed them, layering the new atop the old, like sediment pressed into stone. Sometimes we think of evolution as something finished, a story with an ending. But you are living proof that it continues. Every heartbeat is the same signal that once pulsed in the simplest of organisms. Every breath carries atoms that have passed through countless other lungs, of birds, of trees, of strangers you will never meet. The calcium in your bones was once the dust of stars. The iron in your blood came from supernovae, scattered through the cosmos before Earth was even formed. You're not just made of history, you're made of universe. Take a slow breath and consider this. You're the only version of life that can look back and wonder how it happened. The same process that built your body also built your curiosity. The ability to ask why is itself an evolutionary marvel, a mind trying to see itself. The universe, through you, has become aware of its own unfolding. That is no small thing. There's a quiet gratitude hidden in that realization. For all our technology, all our progress, the body remains our first and finest tool, our way of touching the world and being touched by it. When you walk, you replay the steps of creatures long gone. When you hold someone's hand, you carry forward the same warmth that helped our ancestors survive cold nights. When you breathe, you join every living thing in the same invisible rhythm that began long before humanity existed. And so, when you look at your reflection, the curve of your face, the lines of your hands, the colour of your eyes, try to see not flaws, but stories. You're a collage of time, a mammal's warmth, a reptile's bones, a fish's spine, a star's metal. Even the smallest scar is a record of healing, proof that you are capable of renewal. Every imperfection is a signature of survival. The next time your body frustrates you, when it tires, or aches, or fails to match the ideal you imagine, remember that it is older and wiser than you think. It has been refined, tested, reshaped, and rebalanced across eons. It carries solutions you didn't invent: how to mend, how to breathe, how to rest. It's easy to forget that your body loves you, quietly, persistently, without applause. Its only wish is to keep going. Now, as the night grows softer, take one last deep breath and feel that entire history moving through you. Air that has travelled across oceans, light that began in stars, matter that has lived countless lives before this one. You don't have to do anything to deserve it. You're already part of the ongoing miracle of being. If you listen carefully, you might hear it, the faint hum beneath the quiet, the steady murmur of a body at peace. It's the sound of the world remembering itself through you. Evolution is not something that happened to make you. It became you. And when you wake tomorrow and feel sunlight on your face, try to remember that you are not standing apart from nature. You are its witness, its expression, its continuation. You are the story of life still being written. So breathe deeply, smile if you wish, rest if you can. You don't have to do anything extraordinary to be extraordinary. Simply existing, with all your inherited flaws, your quiet thoughts, your human warmth, is enough. And that's where we'll leave our journey tonight. The body, from stardust to cell, from motion to memory, is the universe made personal. It has walked through oceans and deserts, through darkness and dawn, and somehow arrived here, breathing quietly in the dark, listening. Thank you for being part of this small exploration, this lullaby of science and time. Now, let the rhythm of your own breath carry you to rest. The story will keep unfolding quietly inside you.